This is for the people that have an interest, the people that want to be involved.
There was no collusion at all.
This is for the people that are upset and looking for a place to use their voice.
Both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
This is for the people that want to make a difference, for the people that want to be on the right side of history.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
And I get it. In today's society, it's difficult to have a political opinion and to make it be known. This can be due to fear or because you feel like you don't understand what's going on.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
But if he can do it, so can you. Join me every Sunday on Backstories, where we'll discuss all the top political stories and how it applies to all of us. And trust me, this is not your everyday show on politics. Welcome back to Backstories, everybody. I am the host, Brandon. As always, happy to be here to talk politics with you this Sunday. We're going to jump right into our first segment, which is the Special Prosecution. And this segment details the process and the progress of the Special Prosecutor, Robert Mueller. So this week has shown that he is doing a great job, as we already know. But this week, he has unveiled even more contacts and connections between Russia and Donald Trump, because, this is his game, is to investigate Trump-Russia collusion. Quote, in all, Russians interacted with at least 14 Trump associates, during the campaign and presidential transition. Public records and interviews show, end quote. Now, these people that were making all these contacts and interactions with the Trump campaign range from people as high up as a Russian ambassador to a Russian weightlifter. And I'm not quite sure why a weightlifter is involved in all this, but we're talking about Russia. So the common theme to all these people, however, and their connections to Donald Trump is the fact that they have all been working to assist Trump in stealing the 2016 elections like he did. Now, there were also various moments in which the Russians were taking the lead of the whole scheme of everything, and then there were times when the Russians were taking the lead from Donald Trump, if you will. In other words, that is to say that Donald Trump was the one instigating everything, and they were waiting to get their cues from Donald Trump to act. Here are one of those moments when the Russians were waiting for their cue from Donald Trump.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
On the same day that Trump said this very politically disastrous quote, that same day the Russians made their very first attempt, and they were successful, at hacking Hillary Clinton's personal email server. So, amidst all these 14 interactions that we now know from this week's progression down Robert Mueller's investigation into Donald Trump, here are some of those interactions. Some of these are old news and some of these are newer ones. Quote, the details of the episode match descriptions of an interaction Michael Cohen, had at the time with Dmitry Klokov, a well-connected Russian athlete, the weightlifter, which was first reported by BuzzFeed News, end quote. Quote, Klokov's wife reached out to Ivanka Trump in October 2015, saying she had connections in the Russian government and could help her father build a Trump Tower in Moscow, a project he had long sought, according to a person familiar with the interaction. Ivanka Trump did not know the woman, but forwarded her contact information to Cohen, who later connected with Klokov. People familiar with the exchanges said, end quote. Quote, the special counsel also revealed in recent weeks that Cohen communicated with the Kremlin about efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, and he spoke on the phone with an assistant to Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, after asking Peskov for government help in propelling the project forward, end quote. Quote, Mueller also indicated that his team has been gathering evidence about Manafort's interactions with Konstantin Kalimnik, a Russian army veteran who worked for Manafort in the Kiev office of his political consulting company, end quote. Quote, some outreach came directly from the Russian government. Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak met several Trump advisors, including the then Senator Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, at the Republican National Convention. Trump aide Carter Page has said he was greeted by Deputy Prime Minister Arkady Dvorkovich. Hope I'm saying that right. After delivering a speech in Moscow in July 2016. End quote. Last quote. In June 2016, Donald Trump Jr. met with a Russian lawyer who he was told would provide dirt on Clinton. The meeting was arranged by billionaire Moscow developer Aris Agalarov and his pop star son Eamon. Oh, so now there's a pop star. End quote. So, while none of these meetings in any way produce the smoking gun evidence that we need to prove collusion, they are certainly circumstantial, and they are certainly additive pieces of information that we can use moving forward to show that there was indeed Trump-Russia collusion. So, of course, Donald Trump and his team have constantly and continuously been denying all of this and saying that it never happened, which we can clearly see is all a bunch of lies. And they go back to clearly October 2015, when that lady, the weightlifter's wife, reached out to Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump. So, there's all the connections. There's clearly no denying that there was something going on. There was something not right in the applesauce, so to speak. So, moving on to Paul Manafort now. Paul Manafort is Donald Trump's deceitful former campaign manager. And now he's under even more scrutiny than when I reported on the level of scrutiny he was under last week for lying to the FBI. It was discovered this week that the felon, Paul Manafort, has been giving advice to Donald Trump and his staff on the FBI's Russian investigation. Quote, he gave guidance on how to undermine and discredit the FBI's inquiry into whether Donald Trump, his campaign aides, and family members conspired with the Russian Confederation and its intelligence services to covertly defeat Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign, according to government records and interviews with individuals familiar with the matter. Manafort himself was under criminal investigation by the FBI during that same time, a fact then known to the White House, end quote. So now, not only did Paul Manafort, it clearly wasn't good enough for him to just be a felon, right? Because he got a plea agreement to which he was agreeing to snitch on Trump in exchange for a lighter sentence since he was convicted of other felonies. So, instead of doing that, he decided to continue lying to the FBI, which is a crime, another crime that he's going to get more time added for. And not only did he just do that, he then took this information he was getting out of his interviews with the Special Prosecutor, Robert Mueller. He was taking that information and reporting it to Trump and telling Trump how to use this information to defend himself. I mean, this is clearly a rig, a setup from the get-go. Because, I mean, clearly that was the intention of Paul Manafort to begin with. To only take this plea deal just so he can go and report to Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, he's waiting for Donald Trump to give him this pardon. That's not going to happen, if you ask me. But if it does, then that certainly will be the end of Donald Trump. At any rate, this leads me to believe that, Paul Manafort is either going to comply fully with his plea agreement, or he's just going to take a bigger, badder deal, so to speak. A badder. And I don't know if that's really a word. Or a worse deal. He's going to get a worse deal because he's so blindly loyal to Donald Trump. Quote, after signing the plea agreement, Manafort stated he had no direct or indirect communications with anyone in the administration while they were in the administration. The special counsel said in a court pleading, and that he never asked anyone to try and communicate a message to anyone in the administration on any subject. Citing text messages, Manafort's electronic records, and witness interviews, the special counsel wrote, the evidence demonstrates that Manafort lied about his contacts, end quote. So there you have it. I got a little bit ahead of myself just a second ago, but there's the proof in the pudding that Paul Manafort continues to lie and continues to be an idiot and continues to not do the right thing like he should do. And I don't know what the hell Donald Trump's problem is, because I can't think of anyone in their right mind that would take advice on handling a criminal investigation from a felon and a con man like Paul Manafort. Okay? But here are the following ways that Trump did indeed take advice from Paul Manafort on how to handle this investigation. Number one, Paul Manafort told Trump to attack the FBI and the Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller as a means to delegitimize the investigation. In other words, that is to say, make the public have less confidence in the investigation. Number two, without any evidence, Paul Manafort convinced Trump to make an ass of himself by alleging that the Democratic Party colluded with the Ukrainian government to win the 2016 election. And I must remind everyone that this is not true. Lastly, number three, Paul Manafort gave Trump the strategy to attack Hillary Clinton in that Steele dossier. And if you will remember, the Steele dossier is that intelligence report from that British spy that detailed how Trump colluded with the Russians. And most of it is true. The only part that we're waiting to confirm is true is whether or not Trump hired the prostitutes to come and piss on his bed. So, as an additional sidebar, Robert Mueller will not be alone moving forward in this investigation. The Democratic House of Representative member Adam Schiff, he will now be the chairman for the House Select Intelligence Committee in January when the Democrats take over the House with their new majority. He has officially announced that the Democrats and their new control and their new power in the House are going to reopen the House's Trump-Russia investigation. And this will effectively give Robert Mueller more eyes, more ears, and more resources into completing this investigation, which is so very, very important. So, I want to move on to the final point that I want to make on Donald Trump and all of this nonsense, mostly his investigations. Because I want to point out that he's no longer just getting one investigation. He now has several, a litany of them. Okay? I'm going to let the Washington Post say it for me because they are clearly better at articulating it than I am. Quote, 2 years after Donald Trump won the presidency, nearly every organization, I want to say that again, nearly every organization he has led in the past decade is under investigation, end quote. So, in addition to Trump-Russia collusion, Donald Trump has broken several other laws, several of them, okay, which has led to these additional investigations into all of his businesses now, because is such a brilliant businessman that that we have to investigate him because he's such a great business person. So, let's take a look into these investigations that Trump is now facing. There is the campaign finance investigation, which has now uncovered how Donald Trump broke federal campaign finance laws when he used money to pay off porn stars that he slept with. I want to say that again. Donald Trump used campaign money donated to him from voters, from supporters, from businesses to pay off porn stars that he slept with. I want to really understand the gravity of that. It's important that people understand the gravity of that, because while Robert Mueller in his investigation may take a while to prove collusion, this alone is enough to impeach Donald Trump, according to the Democrats in the House anyway. So, Donald Trump's inauguration committee made $107 million, that of which was a bunch of donated money for Donald Trump to use at his inauguration ceremony, which was supposed to have A-list celebrities, performers, people there to celebrate his inauguration. But as we all know, there was next to no one there for his inauguration, and there were no credible or important, or should I say relevant, celebrities that was performing there. No one wanted to be there, and no one was there. So now he's under investigation because we want to know why and how he misspent that money, because that money is no longer there, and there's no way he spent $107 million on some high school girl choir and some other irrelevant R&B singer who I can't even remember her name. How he spent $107 million on those people, yet when Barack Obama was the president, he had Beyonce and countless other celebrities, yet he only spent around 40-some million. Big difference, right? Okay. The second issue with that is that it has been shown, that there have been foreign government payments to that inauguration, which is again not legal and not cool, Donald Trump. So, his other investigation is going to be the emoluments investigation, in which Trump is facing 2 lawsuits because he continues to receive money from all of his hotels and all of his businesses that he has refused to give up, that of which the Constitution requires that he gives up. At any rate, Donald Trump has kept his businesses. There are foreign people like Saudi Arabia who are buying all these hotel rooms, spending big sums of money in his hotel rooms, and they're now getting what they want from Donald Trump because of it, which is why it is illegal to do that. The emoluments clause prevents a legitimate president from getting foreign money and foreign gifts from foreign governments, because we don't want someone like Donald Trump getting foreign government help and then guiding our country to ally with foreign people that could pervert our government in some way. But we don't have a legitimate president. We have Donald Trump, who, again, stole the election. And then, finally, in New York, the incoming Democratic Attorney General, she is already planning on launching several investigations into Donald Trump, including the emoluments clause, tax fraud, and charity law violations, because Donald Trump has been using his charity money to pay his legal bills. But isn't he a billionaire? So rich? Why are you using charity money to pay your legal bills, Donald? Better yet, why do you have so many legal bills? Maybe if you stopped doing all this criminal business, you would not have so many. But that's another story for another time, and I'll agree with that. So that concludes all the investigations and all the nonsense that has been shown so far from Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, and I've got more for you after the break.
Peaceful, nonviolent protests, including taking a knee at a football game to point out that black men, unarmed, black teenagers, unarmed, and black children, unarmed, are being killed at a frightening level right now, including by members of law enforcement, without accountability and without justice. And this problem, as grave as it is not going to fix itself. And they're frustrated, frankly, with people like me and those in positions of public trust and power who have been unable to resolve this or bring justice for what has been done and to stop it from continuing to happen in this country. And so nonviolently, peacefully, while the eyes of this country are watching these games, they take a knee to bring our attention and our focus to this problem to ensure that we fix it. That is why they are doing it, and I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee for your rights anytime, anywhere, any place.
So, Donald Trump and the Republican thugs in Congress love to refer to anyone affiliated with the Democratic Party as snowflakes. And they use that term to define or describe anyone that they feel is weak or that they feel melts underneath the pressure of everyday life and political life, etc., etc. So, that's exactly what Donald Trump was proven to be when Nancy Pelosi, the incoming Democratic House Speaker, and Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Senate Minority Leader, when they met with him, they made Trump out to be a big snowflake. Just one big bloated snowflake. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi met with Donald Trump because they were going to discuss government spending and government funding moving forward, because that has to be passed through Congress. So, Donald Trump has been continuing his threats to shut down the government, to shut down the government over his ridiculous border wall. That, again, is never, ever, ever going to happen. So there's that. It's never going to happen because he's not going to get the funding, because in order for any government's funding or government spending bill to be passed, Donald Trump is going to need Republican votes. And he's going to need them for these reasons. All right? The Democrats are taking over the House, as we know, in January because they won the midterm elections. So that means not only will he need Democrat votes to pass any law in the House of Representatives, if he were to even do it now, currently with the Republican majority, he would still need Democrat votes in the House because the Republicans have this subgroup called the Tea Party. And the Tea Party, they like to just vote no on everything because that's just what they do. They're the party of no. They say no to everything. Even if it benefits them, they're going to say no. So Donald Trump needs Democrats to pass anything in the House now and in January when the Democrats take over. The other problem that Donald Trump faces is that in order to pass any law concerning government funding and government spending, it has to not only pass the House, but it also has to pass the Senate. And in order for a law concerning government spending and government funding to pass the Senate, it requires 2/3 of the Senate vote. There are 100 senators. There are currently 51 Republican senators, and there are 49 Democrat senators. Well, there's 47, and then 2 independents who vote with the Democrats. So, in order to have 2/3 of the Senate, you have to have at least 60 votes. With 51, Donald Trump would need 9 Democratic senators to come over to their side. And that's likely not going to happen if the legislation has border wall funding in it. So Donald Trump can literally forget about it. And anybody watching this or hearing my voice, you can forget about it. It's not ever going to happen. The wall is never going to happen. I can't stop saying that enough. I believe in my mind and in my heart of hearts that if I continue to repeat it, maybe some of those blind Trump supporters will get it, because it seems like as much as he keeps repeating things, people tend to believe it. Well, I'm going to keep repeating that this wall is not going to happen so that people will understand it and believe me, because it's not going to happen. At any rate, Pelosi and Trump and Chuck Schumer all met together, and they were pretending to be nice. They were, very fake, smiling for the cameras, and that was until Donald Trump opened his mouth. And he made himself look stupid, and then he got schooled by Pelosi and Schumer. Here's a good look at some of the highlights from that meeting that took place.
There are no votes in the House, a majority of votes, for a wall, no matter where you start.
Exactly right. You don't have
If I needed the votes for the wall in the House, I would have them in one session,
Well, then
would
go
be
do
done.
it. Go do it.
It doesn't help because we need 10 Democrats in
No,
the
don't
Senate.
put it on the Senate. Put it on the negotiation.
Okay, let me ask you this, and we're doing this in a very friendly manner. It doesn't help for me to take a vote in the House where I will win easily with the Republicans.
not win.
It doesn't help to take that vote because I'm not going to get the vote
Don't put
of
it
the
on
Senate. I need
Mr.
10
President.
senators.
The fact is, you do not have the votes in the House.
Nancy, I do. And we need
Well,
border
let's take the
security.
vote and we'll
Nancy,
find out.
Nancy, we need border security. It's very simple.
We do not want to shut down the government. You have called 20 times to shut down the government. You say, I want to shut down the government. We don't. We want to come to an agreement. If we can't come to an agreement, we have solutions that will pass the House and Senate right now and will not shut down the government, and that's what we're urging you to do. Not threaten to shut down the government,
you don't
because
wanna
let me
shut
just
down the
finish,
government, Chuck.
because you can't get
The
your
last
way.
time you shut it down, you
Yeah,
got
let me
killed.
say something, Mr. President. You just say, my way or we'll shut down the government. We have a proposal that Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take
And
it.
if it's not good border security, I
It
won't
is
take it.
very good border
And if it's not
security.
good border
That's what
security,
border
I won't
security
take. By
is.
us.
We want to do the same thing we did last year, this year. That's our proposal. If it's good then, it's good now, and it won't shut down the government.
Chuck, we can build a
But that's
much
it.
bigger
Let's-
section
let's
with
debate-
more money.
Let's debate in private.
We need border security. The wall is a part of border security. You can't have very good border security without the wall, no.
And the experts say you can do border security without a wall, which is wasteful and doesn't solve the problem.
It totally solves
But
the
I don't wanna
problem.
ta-
When the president brags that he won North Dakota and Indiana, he's in real trouble.
When I
did.
Let me say, came in here in good faith, and we're entering into this kind of a discussion in the public view.
But it's not bad, Nancy.
No.
It's
but
called transparency.
I know, it's not transparency when we're not stipulating to a set of facts and when we want to have a debate with you about saying we confront some of those facts without
You know
saying to
what?
the
We need
public,
border security.
this
That's what
isn't
we're going to be
true.
talking about, border security. If we don't have border security, we'll shut down the government.
We shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute, and you want to shut it down. You
No,
keep
no, no,
talking
no.
about
The
it.
last time, Chuck, you shut it down.
No.
And then you opened
20
it up very
times.
quickly. And
20
I don't want to
times.
do what you did.
20
But,
times you
Chuck,
have called for, I will shut down the government if I don't get my wool. None of us have said.
You want to know something?
You've said
Okay,
it.
you want to put that on
You've
my...
said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay, fair
Absolutely.
enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck.
And I must say that my favorite part out of this whole meeting and out of this whole situation was the moment when Nancy Pelosi got to check the hell out of Donald Trump when he attempted to mansplain to her authority as the incoming House Speaker for the House of Representatives. Here's that moment.
Government. I also know that, Nancy's in a situation where it's not easy for her to talk right now, and I understand that, and I fully understand that. We're going to have a good discussion, and we're going to see what happens. But we have to have border security.
Mr. President, please don't characterize the strength that I bring to this meeting as the leader of the House Democrats who just won a big victory.
Elections
But
have
let me-
consequences,
let me
Mr.
just-
President.
Let me just say.
That's right. And that's why the country is doing so well.
For the president,
Yes, everybody. So what you just witnessed was a 70-year-old grown man throwing a tantrum, literally throwing a hissy fit, because he's not getting his way. This type of behavior is normal for a certain age group of people, and that age group is known as the terrible twos, which is basically a 2-year-old toddler. It is not appropriate or okay for a 70-year-old grown man to be doing this. So speaking of Donald Trump, his dumb behavior, child immature-like behavior, I want to move on to my favorite segment, I Cannot Be Bothered, where I'm going to tell you some of the pieces of news that came across that were ridiculous or just outright on its face stupid, and something that I'm choosing not to be bothered with. So, when it comes to the defense that Republicans give Donald Trump for his illegal conduct, I cannot be bothered. Here's a clip of the most recent desperate attempts by the Republicans to defend Donald Trump in his illegal conduct.
I think the Democrats will do anything to hurt this president. Anything.
But this is not the Democrats, this is the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney. I mean, that's what's making this allegation.
I don't care. All I can say is he's doing a good job as president.
The president hires an attorney to solve a problem. He expects him to do it in a legal manner. I don't see, and if Schiff is taking this beyond to go forward and say there's a impeachable offense because of a campaign finance problem, there's a lot of members in Congress who would have to leave for that same place.
Now, these defenses, of course, were greeted with this response.
God forbid.
Right.
Maybe? How many?
Right.
How many?
And I'm sure that that sentiment was not only shared amongst those reporters, but it was also shared globally. I mean, at least it was shared amongst me, my friends, and my colleagues. Because, come on, those defenses were meritless, and that's being very nice about it. When it comes to Donald Trump and his chief of staff issues, I definitely cannot be bothered. Donald Trump recently announced that John Kelly is now his former chief of staff. Donald Trump had his hopes set that Nick Ayers would replace John Kelly, but he was turned down. Mr. Ayers said no, he didn't want to have anything to do with Trump. Donald Trump, being the unprofessional person that he is, didn't have a plan B in place, and now that Mr. Ayers has declined him, and no one else will take that position, Donald Trump he's kind of going crazy. I mean, crazier, so to speak. Instead, Donald Trump has appointed the Office of Management and Budget Director, Mick Mulvaney, as the acting chief of staff. And it must be noted that Mr. Mulvaney only accepted to be the acting chief of staff after he refused to take the position permanently. And I mean, can you really blame him for doing that? When it comes to old white men and technology and their technological faux pas, I really cannot be bothered. Last week, the old white Republican that had a technological faux pas was Rudy Giuliani. And this week, it was Republican House of Representative member Steve King from Iowa. The Republicans in the House had the CEO of Google, his name is Sunday Pichai, I hope I'm saying that right, in a hearing. And they had him in the hearing because the Republicans feel that Google is biased against them. Here we go with their conspiracy theories again. To make his point vividly clear, Republican Steve King used an iPhone to really drive home his point that Google was having a bias against them because he said that Google makes the iPhone and he knew that Google was biased because he Googled Donald Trump and it said Donald Trump was an idiot or whatever Google gave back to him. However, what Steve King failed to realize was the fact that Google does not make the iPhone. So his whole iPhone stunt was totally irrelevant and totally pointless. But here's the footage because it was funny nonetheless.
We're going. And I would just finish it with this. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who picked up her phone before the election, and she's playing a little game, kind of game a kid would play, and up on there pops a picture of her grandfather. And I'm not going to say into the record what kind of language was used around that picture of her grandfather, but I'd ask you, how does that show up on a 7-year-old's iPhone who's playing a kid's game?
Congressman, iPhone is made by a different company, and so,
It might have been an Android. It was a hand-me-down of some kind.
So, there you have it. Those are the things that I cannot be bothered with this week. And we're going to have our featured first interview for Backstories right after this break.
We don't fear the attacks against us. We don't fear right to work. Our power comes from the connection between us. We want regular people to be able to work hard and get ahead. We want fairness. We want dignity. We want everybody to have access to the American dream. We're going to fight for it. We're going to stand for it. We're going to march for it. We're not going to be held down, and we're not going to be pushed around. It is high time for us to take America back, because America is hungry for unity. Let's lead our country forward.
Today is our first interview on Backstories. We have the up-and-coming Benjamin Plassman. He's a journalist, author, and activist in Toledo, Ohio. He's the host of How to Revitalize the City on the radio, YouTube, and podcast. Our interview covered both local and national issues, but I've only included the national discussion on this episode. The full interview can be found on our podcast outlets and on a separate YouTube video. So let's get to it. Here's the full interview. All right, so we're going to stay on the issue of healthcare a little bit. This is kind of moving towards some of my more national level questions for you. But this one can apply to Toledo and local and national. So what are your views on our healthcare laws and whatnot across the country so far, or Toledo, which is, we're kind of all under one. But and what else do you think that we need to do to make it more affordable, accessible?
Yeah, well, the United States has, by far and away, the most efficient and highest priced healthcare system in the world. Mm-hmm. We also have the best doctors, and we rank #1 in terms of overall quality of care at the highest level, because we have the best doctors, we have the best medical research, and those are good things you don't want to let go of. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about ProMedica, our hope is we're not really talking about ProMedica necessarily. We're talking about the healthcare system as a whole.
Right.
Because ProMedica is just one of many organizations that do this. Because we live in the Toledo area, we have more intimate knowledge of how they go about their business. Mm-hmm. But there's all these other healthcare systems that are much, much larger and more powerful than ProMedica that do this exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And what we find is a lot of times there's so many different aspects to healthcare, it's very complicated. But there's conflicts of interest with regards to pricing. Mm-hmm. And it is very inefficient as a result, and who picks up the cost ultimately is the consumers. So there needs to be something done to reform this, and there's just so many ways to do it. We're going to create a healthcare episode all about it, but to be honest, we've done so much research on healthcare, and it's still like we're just at the bare level because it's just unbelievably nuanced. But it's still, I mean,
I think that they make it harder than what they
yeah,
have to
and
make
like
it
if you
harder.
want a system that you could benefit from financially, you try to make it so complicated that it's almost impossible to reform.
Exactly.
You know, like, and maybe that's again too conspiratorial, but I don't know why it has to be so expensive necessarily. You know, America, I think about 26% of overall healthcare costs are based on administrative costs. Other countries, it's about 8 to 13%. Administrative costs shouldn't be that expensive.
Absolutely.
And you're not actually improving the overall product of your healthcare by having such a high percentage in administrative costs. So we're diving into that especially to look at how healthcare can be reformed. And it's upsetting almost that certain practices happen in certain ways. And we're going to talk about that on our show. It's an emotional topic, though.
I bet, absolutely, especially for me who more directly works in it all the time. You know?
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm sure.
It can get to be very taxing.
Yeah.
So since you are my finance economic expert,
we talk to experts, and they tell us what to think.
Right.
No, I'm kidding. No, we talk to experts from around the country. We usually get experts that are like economists that know certain types of policies and have written and published a lot of articles for it because they have the most intimate knowledge of it and they can break it down pretty easily.
Right.
And it's pretty cool because you get to talk to some of the smartest people in the country.
And actually get an understanding of it.
Yeah, and like they're really accessible. You just, we literally just email them or we talk to people that they know who give us their contact information. And we usually have a good time talking with them, and we just talk to them over the phone. We record our conversations, and we be posting them a lot of them on our show. So, yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think of the? I do a lot of reporting, or I have done, on the Republican tax cuts that occurred.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts on those? Are there any flaws? Can they be improved?
You know, actually, when it comes to economics. There are certain ways, not pretty much economists, the way they look at it, and this is kind of more or less uniform, like no tax is necessarily good, but they have to be paid. Because there's certain things as a society that we agree upon that should be paid taxes. And what you want to do, if you're going to have to make a tax, which you have to, is you have to figure out what types of economic behavior are types of things that aren't as beneficial to economic growth in your economy. For example, cigarettes. You know, everybody should have the right to smoke if they want to, but it doesn't really improve the health. It actually hurts people's health, and a lot of times people eventually, when they get older and are on Medicare, they have to go to the hospital and they have more health complications than they otherwise would had they not smoked. So I think it's okay to tax that. Now, there are certain types of things, though, like our corporate tax rate in America was the highest in the entire world, or one of the highest at least. And we thought initially that reducing the corporate tax rate is probably a good thing. You know, the Republicans and Democrats actually agree on it. Obama, Bill Clinton, they both agreed that we should reduce the corporate tax rates. It's a consensus politically on both sides. But we talked to economists, and the way they did it, if you really want to... part of the problem with corporate tax rates is companies have been taking their money, instead of paying taxes in America, they store their money overseas, which have much lower tax rates. As a result, these tax shelters kind of prevent them from paying taxes to the United States government because they're much higher, and that reduces the amount of revenue that we get. We could actually literally get more revenue by reducing our tax rates. Than having these companies potentially come back. But we spoke to an economist. What was his name, Ashmita? The economist that we spoke to regarding the tariffs, or not the tariff, the corporate tax rate. Hoyt Bleakley. Great economist, economist from MIT. He is a professor at the University of Michigan. And what he told us is like the way that we went about doing this with our tax policy was in a way that actually isn't going to necessarily encourage more growth as opposed to other alternatives. For example, by cutting the corporate tax rate so low all at once, we're not going to immediately be attracting businesses to come back to the United States because, you know, businesses, they plan ahead. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is like have a gradual reduction so businesses can plan ahead and eventually, hopefully, potentially relocate. So all in all, maybe reducing the corporate tax rate is good, but the way they went about it, doing it was less intelligent than it otherwise could be. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that I found interesting. With regards to taxes in general, we focused on local economic policy more or less, and I don't think we focused necessarily as much of our research with regards to tax policy in the United States, but we're going to cover it a little bit.
Okay. All right. So now moving on to more hot button issues.
Oh, come on, you haven't given me anything hot yet.
Oh, I haven't given you. Okay.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So what is your stance on the Trump-Russia collusion and the Special Prosecutor Mueller investigation?
Okay. So our show is nonpartisan.
Absolutely.
And our hope is I don't want anybody to know what political party I am. Mm-hmm. Because what I realized is once you state the political party that you're a part of, the other side isn't going to care.
Right.
And I think the policies that we're talking about are local government. There's really no ideology with regards to how things should be done. And we don't want people to feel neglected by having us say, okay, we're partisans in this area. So yes, I vote, and there is a political party I tend to prefer. I don't always vote with that party, though, I will say that. And what we want is to remain nonpartisan. But with regards to Trump, Russia, and collusion, I will say this. I care a lot, I'm very passionate personally, that the United States is a nation of laws. The rule of law should be enforced, regardless of who you are. And I don't know if there was something illegal that happened with regards to the Trump administration in Russia. That report has not come out yet. But if there was, I hope, because of certain provisions within the Constitution, a president can't be indicted apparently. Mm-hmm. They got to be impeached. And I would hope that if he did break a law and it was an egregious action, that justice is served and our Congress does impeach him. Mm-hmm. But that's very circumstantial. It depends on what law he broke. And if it was a horrible act of like, okay, if Trump goes to Vladimir Putin or his connections in the Kremlin, and he personally was involved in a deal where he would give Russian like reduce sanctions or something in exchange for helping him get elected president. Mm-hmm. That's concerning to me as an American. And I really believe it doesn't matter what party you're in, it matters that something like that would happen. And this is purely speculative. Mm-hmm. But I do believe in that very strongly.
And I like that you said as an American, not as a Republican.
Yeah, and I believe in things like, I will speak out. If the government ever tries to infringe upon freedom of speech, freedom of the press, if they ever pass a law that makes it harder for things to happen with regards to what the press reports or something like that, I don't care what party people are in. I think it's important. It's a fundamental American right that we have the freedom of press and freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. And that's something I care a lot about.
Now, I do want to ask you this because you said, like, you don't want to make your political party known, and I can agree with that and understand that. What would you say to the people that would say, okay, if you can't pick a side, then, that's...
Oh, I can pick a side. It's just I'm not going to publicize my side.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
I guess the way I look at it is what we're promoting, I think, while politics is involved, these issues should be apolitical. And I hope, let's say somebody lives in Montgomery, Alabama, and they have a horrible local government that really hurts the economic growth of their community. I hope that they can listen to this and be inspired to do something and take on action, whether it's potentially running for office or getting information out to the people so their communities can improve. Because there's no excuse for how some of these local governments act.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our frustrations is local governments, especially Toledo's, we're making economic policy that we don't even consult experts on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, if I'm a doctor, you're in the medical field, okay? So, like, let's say I go up to you and I'm like, I could do surgery just as well as you could. And let's say you're a surgeon. I don't know what you necessarily do in the medical field. But, like,
right.
I don't think it's good to have somebody do surgery that isn't nuanced and understands how to do surgery. And maybe the medical field is a little bit more nuanced than economics, but the world of economics, while it's still divided in certain regards, and economists don't agree on everything, they have come to consensuses amongst a lot of things. And what happens now is government officials, they get elected and they think, okay, because I have this power, I can decide to make economic policy based on the little that I know about economics.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have around the country is you have people, and I don't mean to be mean, but I don't know how else to say this, laymen,
Mm-hmm.
people without educations in economics that are making economic decisions for the entire community. And if you look at the economic organizations that run Toledo, Port Authority, Regional Growth Partnership, the County Commissioners, Toledo Local Government, none of them employ economists. Zero. Zero economists.
Wow.
They get some people that are consultants that have their PhDs in like political science.
Mm-hmm.
But I got my bachelor's degree in political science, and I'll be the first to tell you, Brandon, we didn't touch much on economics.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what a PhD, how that would be different. I don't have my PhD in economics, but I wouldn't imagine that it would be very different from that.
Absolutely not. That's understandable. All right. Push you a little bit further. If you could offer some constructive criticism on the Republican Party, what would it be?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd say criticism because we don't want this show to be partisan.
Well, I was going to also ask you about the Democrat Party afterwards.
I will tell you one thing. I believe your party should stay true to its platform and its principles, regardless of who the politician is. And that'd be what I would say.
For both sides.
Advice. Yes, for both sides.
Okay, that's understandable.
And be loyal to your views. Don't play politics and just support whoever is on your side, if that makes sense. And that'd be my advice to both parties, I guess.
Right. So, basically, your word is your bond, so to speak.
Yeah, and like the whole point of politics isn't this whole beauty pageant that kind of our news media makes it out to be.
Right.
But it's to do the will of the people and to represent us well and help improve our lives. And so I think it's very important that the party acts according to their principles on both sides, as opposed to doing things that whatever their leader supports, they go along with.
Okay. So there seems to be a lot of race-based tension or resentment in the country. Where do you think that stems from?
It's a good question. I'll tell you, I'm a white guy. I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to speak on race. I support equal rights. And I think that's something that everybody as an American should agree with. Everybody should have equal rights. And I will say, there's some really offensive activity that's happening with certain groups around the country. And they're not based in an intellectual dialogue. One of the frustrating things about hate groups is you can't reason with them. It's about this emotion of anger and fear and resentment. And so that's not good, obviously. And I don't know where it's coming from. I'm not a person that is somebody that has researched this enough. But I can tell you as a human being, we have people, at least on the violence in Toledo, that are of all ethnicities. Maybe not all, I don't know how many ethnicities there are. But we have a diverse group, and we treat people based on how good they are at what they do.
Right. Skill.
Yeah. And talent, we found out, has no borders. Some people are from other countries that have come here to America, and they're amazing. And there's one, Ashmita, that is a star, and she is originally from India, and she's amazing. She's done amazing work for us. And what we believe is, if you're good, you're good. We don't care. And who should care, to be honest?
Right.
It's just, it's arbitrary.
Right. All right.
So that sounds, sorry, that probably sounds really naive.
No, that's understandable. My view on race is just I don't try to take anybody's say, okay, you can't participate because you are.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I don't agree with
we're
you like that.
nonpartisan, but we're not going to say, oh, we're not going to have any opinion on the Klan.
Exactly. Right.
Like, you know, that's
what's
something I think we
obviously
should
what's right
agree
is right
on,
and what's
you know,
wrong is
like,
wrong.
yeah. The Klan, I think we agree the Klan is bad.
Absolutely. Hopefully we would agree, right?
I hope most people. I mean, obviously some don't, but I hope that's just a very, very small sliver of society.
Right. We
Yeah.
hope and pray.
Yeah.
In what ways do you feel that people from our generation,
Yeah.
our generation, look, I don't want to reveal any ages, our generation,
millennials, which
right,
is vague.
millennials.
We're vague.
How can the millennials contribute more to civics and politics, and how do we reach out to get more of them involved?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Millennials I think, have the largest population. Have we overtaken?
Yes, effectively.
What was it?
The baby boomers.
Baby boomers we've taken over. But we still don't vote at the same rate.
Right, they outvote
If you look at our politicians, think about this is how we think about it, at least, and you might disagree. You look at Trump. Somebody elected Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we look at politicians in maybe the abstract form. Like, we look at them as reflections of the people that they represent. You know, when you have congressmen saying things that seem irrational, it's because that's what their constituents want them to say, and that's how they remain at their job. And so, what we look at it is one of the best ways to get involved as a millennial is to make sure millennials vote. It's so important. And, you know, if you want changes to happen, these politicians are reflections of who voted for them. And if not enough millennials are coming out to vote, you shouldn't be surprised when politicians do things that hurt our generation. And our generation has already lost a lot economically, being that many of us came up during the financial crash of 2008. And our generation is universally much, much less well off than previous generations were at our age. So we're already on the tough end of things. And if we want to make sure that we're not completely hosed, for example, like we're paying for Social Security right now. If we want to make sure that our generation gets Social Security that we pay for in the future, it's probably important that we vote for it, you know, or we vote for things. And so that's kind of how I look at it with regards to millennials. And I mean, if you want to, like, it's so important to vote, I guess I would say, and that's where the difference is made at the ballot box. You know, people can volunteer for things, people can go to events and yell and do protests against Trump. But if you didn't vote, you're not going to hold him in line. You know, like, they care about voters. If you're not a likely voter, they're not going to care about your demographic because that's not relevant to their job. Oftentimes. I'm not speaking for every politician, though, because, I mean, you never know.
Well, most
and there are some that we've met that I think are very good people. So, I mean, it depends.
Right. That's true. All right. So, what do you think we need to do as a country to bring the country together? What is it going to take to get the country back together? Or
so
put it
you're
together?
implying that it's divided, and I think that's safe to say. I find it interesting that people don't vote as much based on issues anymore. There's been many studies that have proven this. They vote for parties. So if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, depending on what area you're in, it's all based on that. So, like, what you're doing then, though, is based on the way things are gerrymandered in certain areas, as well as if, like, for example, Utah has a very strong Democratic presence. California, on the state level, usually has a very strong, or Utah has a very strong Republican presence, and California, for example, has a very strong Democratic. But, like, what you're then doing, though, is if you only vote, what is it called, straight ticket, you're pretty much allowing the parties then to dictate the policies for you, as opposed to having a nuanced discussion on things. And you might not agree with everything your party supports. So I think it's important that people understand that you should be a little bit more nuanced with who you vote for. I really believe when considering who to vote for, you don't just necessarily consider your party, whether you feel strongly about an issue or not. You might have to look at, like, what type of job are they filling? What's their responsibilities? You know, let's say you're adamantly pro-choice liberal. You know, if you're voting for treasurer, the treasurer's candidates on abortion really aren't going to impact your community very much. So you might not want to vote just based on that issue. And same goes for the other side. And so I think it's important that we have a more nuanced base of voting. And I think what's happened over time, over the past few decades, is news has turned into kind of entertainment. And so CNN and like all the national news outlets, they're more entertainment than they are actual news. They take news and they spin it in an entertaining way. And as a result, they work people out based on social issues, and people vote accordingly, and people become more divided. And you see, as these networks get more powerful, the partisan divide in our society becomes greater. And at least from my opinion, and I'm not actually representing the view of everybody at revitalizing the city, or how to revitalize the city, I should say. I'm saying this from my perspective, that it's not good to do that. I think we should be more nuanced, and I think that would create less division. But that's my opinion. I'm speaking, I guess, from my behalf and not how to revitalize a city's behalf.
Okay. So it'll be interesting to see how you avoid partisanship with this next question.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting.
I don't want to avoid it. Well, yeah, I guess. But
you don't want to give the, you don't want to display it publicly.
Racism is bad.
Right.
I don't think that's a political thing. I don't think it. If it is, it shouldn't be.
But I'm more interested in what you think the bipartisan approach is going to be to these. Okay. So that's exactly what the question is. What do you think the bipartisan resolution is to these next hot topic issues?
Okay.
So, or you can even say that there might not be one.
Yeah.
Because some people might feel like there might not be one. So, abortion.
Yeah, that's one. I don't know if there would be one because, I think the pro-life versus pro-choice debate, it's something that people don't change their minds about. It's something that, it's a morality choice. And as somebody with this show, I'm not good at talking about things that I can't prove.
Right.
So, I like things that you can prove. There's nothing really to prove with regards to the abortion topic. And so, it's something that I guess, strangely enough, I don't have much of an opinion on either way. But it's something that I don't think people will ever come to a clear consensus on. But I think you should vote not just based on that
that
issue.
one principle, right.
But some people do. And, I can see why they do it too. From certain people's perspectives, it is considered murder. And, if you feel that way, I can't prove you're wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just something that...
It is what it is.
I don't know I don't know. Yeah.
Gun rights. What's the bipartisan approach?
Well, that's a tough one. Statistically speaking, I think gun violence, at least from what I've read, is slightly down across the United States decade after decade. But that doesn't mean it's good, you know? But I think we could have common sense gun laws that can be applicable for both parties, I don't think, the right to bear arms, for example, an arm, that's pretty vague. It doesn't, what about a tank?
Right.
That's an arm. Right to bear arms, that's armor. You're armed with a tank.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think people should have tanks, and I think both parties should agree on that. And what's the point of certain types of...
or rocket launchers, or
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, a nuclear weapon might not be good, no matter how much Elon Musk wants to create one.
Right.
No, I'm kidding.
For all of us. The household nuke, okay?
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever come to a consensus on that, though. But,
so certain
I don't know
things
the
like
answers
background
either,
checks
to be
or
honest.
something like that
Yeah.
could be bipartisan. I
guess,
say, rocket launchers and grenades certainly don't belong.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree there.
Yeah, you can, back when they made the Second Amendment, a musket, I think, was what they used, right?
Exactly. Not even a
have a machine gun.
Right.
But then again, I do sympathize. If you live in certain areas, carry guns for protection. And it's unfortunate, but I do believe you should have the right to do that because, I don't want to, I feel like guns, I mean, it's something inevitable right now in America. We have more more guns in America than people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not going to be a political solution to just outlawing guns. And anybody that thinks that
is out of their mind.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? And so, since guns are inevitable, people that live in certain areas should have some. Mm-hmm. I think it's safe for you too. I've had a few roommates that used to be in the military that owned guns too. And when I was in graduate school at the University of Toledo, I lived actually in a house that was on Nebraska Avenue, and I didn't know it was dangerous till later when people were knocking at my door with their car broken down and saying, "I'm not going to rob you," and that's kind of scary,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think you might need a gun for protection in certain areas, and so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I don't know, and it's not something that is necessarily something that I'm very strongly opinionated about, but I see both sides, I guess.
Mm-hmm. What about immigration? Is there a bipartisan approach to that?
Yes, there is. I really think so, because first off, you don't want, there's only so much, the study shows that there's only so much of a new population that any country can take at a time. You look at even Barack Obama, when he was in office, he tried to regulate immigration as well, and he actually prevented a lot more immigration from happening at the border. He was against too much immigration as well. He said, we have laws, this is a nation of laws, and you have to abide by the laws or else you can't live here. Absolutely. And so that should be said, but I do think what has happened is because there's been inflammatory rhetoric on one side. It is, I guess there might be on the other side, I don't know, but I don't hear that as much. But people get so inflamed, but I think, we should have a common sense argument for it, because, there are certain types of immigrants that are definitely in our national interest to have into our country. Mm-hmm. Our country has a projected doctor shortage coming up in the future. We need people with their MBAs in finance. We need financial analysts. We need people who are engineers, software and robotic engineers, and all sorts of engineers for that matter. And by making them go through a strenuous process to become an American citizen hurts us. Mm-hmm. And right now, America is still the number one place for immigrants to go to who want opportunity. So I think what we should do is make sure we don't lose out on this talent. Because when we're missing out on this talent, we're hurting our own economy. Mm-hmm. And we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. And absolutely. I don't think that's good. But I just think it needs to be almost, the emotions and the anxiety about it needs to be calmed down for us to have a reasonable discussion on it. Mm-hmm. And I hope that could happen one day. And I think I remain optimistic about the future with regards to that. Mm-hmm. I really do. I think our politics, this polarized form of politics is coming to an end soon.
I believe so.
And I talk to a lot of millennials who are I don't care about political party. I just want to do within the best practical interests of society. And I think in general, millennials tend to be a little bit more pragmatic than partisan. Mm-hmm. And I really do hope they vote more as a result. And I hope they don't vote straight ticket.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Just my opinion.
And then, what is the bipartisan approach to voter suppression?
Okay.
End it.
It's insane that we actually spoke to an economist on this as well, Ashmita and I. And Ashmita's over there for those of you listeners. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
You can't hear her, but she's amazing. Anyways, we interviewed an economist. James Bland was his name, I believe, right, Ashmita? Yeah, James Bland. And despite his name, it wasn't actually that bland of a conversation. But he was actually originally from Australia.
Right. Oh, okay.
And he was telling me, the equation, you think about it, it's not actually in anybody's own economic self-interest to vote, because there's so many people voting, and any one individual isn't going to change the outcome of an election. People do it, though, because they think if I don't vote, then who else will? Mm-hmm. And you have to have that mentality if you want everyone to vote, because it's really not in your economic self-interest for you to vote. Now, this calculation, though, gets more fuzzy, though. let's say, for example, certain types of people, voting in America happens on a Tuesday. Certain types of people might be busy on Tuesdays.
Right.
And they might have more going on. Not just young people, but people in the business world, people who are busy working. Sometimes Tuesday is the busy day for a lot of people at work. And so that calculation factors into it. So people are like, well, yeah, ideally I'd like to vote, but I just don't have the time to get there today. My day's jam-packed. And there is early voting, which helps combat that. But I think instead of just having early voting, what I think should be done is voting should take place on a weekend. And it should be done in a way, and it wouldn't cost much more to do this. But you have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to vote. And it's open all day, and people can choose when to vote. And it's not going to be perfect. Like, certain people still aren't going to maybe be able to afford to to go that vote, or people might think, you know, I'm really broke right now. Let's say people in poverty, for example, don't vote as much because they might not have access to transportation. They might not have, they might have other things they have to do. They might have 2 jobs, for example, and they just don't have time to vote. But like, at least expanding the process and making it more available to people and having it take place on a day where people are typically more available will be very beneficial to representation. And what I view is by creating more obstacles. Yes, election security, that's good if that's really what the true intention is, because we want to make sure that every vote is counted accurately and effectively. But we need a combination of both election security and making sure that these elections are held in the way that has the most integrity and is as accurate as possible. We need to compromise that, though, with allowing the opportunity for people to vote in ways that are very accessible to them. You look at the demographics, the number one demographic that always votes are people that are older. A lot of times, though, people that are older, they're retired. You know, they don't have much to do, so they have the opportunity to, you know, go out and vote. So that skews election results also.
Absolutely.
And that's why our politicians seem to care a lot about the older demographic, which is fine, and they're people too, but like, it'd be better if they'd have more of a nuanced approach to everybody, representing everybody equally.
Okay. And lastly, last question.
Yeah.
What is your biggest fear for the country?
My biggest fear for the country, I do think the country is headed, economically speaking, we're headed very much in the right direction. I think globalization has brought about innovation. Actually, this financial crisis has also brought it about to where there is going to be a lot more innovation. One of the interesting things I found about economic growth and researching for the show is it used to be in economics that they thought economic growth can be attributed to one of 2 factors, either increases in capital or increases in labor. But what they later found out in the 50s, I forget the name of the economist that discovered this, but he found out about 90% of economic growth is actually attributed to increases in productivity. What productivity is the amount of output per worker. So, for example, when you do things in a more innovative way and more efficiently, that enables businesses to do things more cheaply, and because it's a competitive business environment, usually other businesses catch on, and it's uniformly prices for things are cheaper.
Right.
As a result, people can buy more, and since it's less labor intensive, people can work on doing other things that are economically beneficial to the economy. So, economically, in terms of productivity, there's a lot of new things that are happening. Robotics is going to be huge. There is a lot of automation everywhere. Driverless cars are going to be the new thing. And while this will take away a lot of jobs from people, the hope is there'll be other jobs and means of employment to preoccupy people instead. And I think economically speaking, in the long term, over the next few decades, America's actually going to do pretty well economically speaking. And so long as our values are upheld, and we remain true to like our principles, we don't impinge on the freedom of speech, we make sure that we have the most accurate form of a judicial system, a rule of law, and we just hold true to, like, I guess our principles, I think America is best positioned out of any country in the world to strive in this global economy. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's very nuanced, actually. In studying finance, you realize just how awesome a lot of American finance laws are. While maybe they should be a little bit more regulated, there's still a lot of benefits to the way America does its economic policy and the laws it makes that help kind of increase innovation and also increase investment as well. So I view these things as very good, and I just hope there's not enough turmoil, especially socially, to prevent this progress from happening.
That makes sense. Alrighty, well, you want to go ahead and give some contact information to the audience on your show and how they can reach you?
The name of our show is changed from Revitalizing Toledo to How to Revitalize a City. And it's going to be on 106.1 WAKT, as well as we're working with random other radio stations in order to have it on their shows as well. These include areas in Detroit and other places too. We also have podcasts that are going to be coming out, and they're going to be hopefully really good. By the way, you're welcome on.
Oh, well, thank you. I will gladly take the offer.
And feel free to check us out. Our Facebook, Twitter, it's all How to Revitalize a City. And check us out. Feel free to email us, and we will keep in touch with you. Thank you so much, though, for having me.
Again, the full interview is available separately on our podcast outlets and as a separate video on YouTube. So be sure to check it out. In the meantime, I'll come to conclude after the break.
Brothers and sisters, it's time. And I know you can feel it. 2. Let's fight for those who fight for us. 3. You see, something's happening in America. When we stand together, we have the power.
Alright, so I actually don't have a full monologue for you guys this week, but I do want everyone to know how important it is to live in their moment and to take action when they feel compelled to do so. Never let anyone or anything take those moments away from you. Today, I am actually on my way to Europe as you're watching or listening to this show, and I am going with one of my closest friends, and he's a Republican. I am blessed to be given this opportunity, and despite what many people may think, I remain his friend despite his political involvement, and he remains my friend as well. We're able to cast aside our differing ideologies and come together and to take action together in the spirit of humanity. I encourage everyone, everywhere, to do the exact same thing. With that said, as you can imagine, there will not be a show of Backstories next week. I will still be in Europe, and I will actually be participating in vacation instead of working. I will truly miss you all, but I promise to return on December 30th, 2018, and I want to thank you for watching this week's episode of Backstories. Please remember to like us on Facebook at BackstoriesUS, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TheBrandonDais, and subscribe to us on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and Google Play Music. The information can be found by visiting our website, www.backstories-us.com. I look forward to seeing you guys on December 30th, 2018 for another episode of Backstories, which will not be your everyday show on politics.